Good morning, all of you. So let's start with today's analysis that is going to be for 12th of May 2023. So सबसे पहले we will have a look at the Supreme Court की recent judgment क्या रही regarding the issue that was going on in Maharashtra. So Supreme Court says कि जो governor का decision था to call the floor test, it was wrong. So court effectively opens the door for disqualification of Shinde camp, but says कि जो महाराष्ट्र के गवर्नर थे was justified in inviting to form the government as ठाकरे quit voluntarily before the trust vote. तो जो फ्लोर टेस्ट का डिसीजन था दैट वाज रॉन्ग, क्योंकि जो इससे पहले चीफ मिनिस्टर थे उन्होंने वॉलंटैरली क्विट किया था. सो गिवन दैट फिर उसके बाद जो उन्होंने डिसीजन लिया रिगार्डिंग इनवाइटिंग द शिंदे कैंप टू फॉर्म द गवर्नमेंट, उसमें कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं थी. तो अब हमारे लिए जो सुप्रीम कोर्ट की प्रीवियस जजमेंट्स है रिगार्डिंग द फ्लोर टेस्ट दैट बिकम्स इम्पोर्टेंट. So Supreme Court in a unanimous judgment effectively it opened the doors for disqualification proceedings against Maharashtra Chief Minister Eknath Shinde for defection from the Shiv Sena and held that the then Governor Bhagat Singh Koshyari erred in calling for a trust vote which triggered the fall of the Uddhav Thackeray-led Mahavikas Aghadi, which was MVA government in mid 2022. तो उस पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम पे जो ट्रस्ट वोट का डिसीजन था वो गलत था, जिसकी वजह से जो गवर्नमेंट पावर में थी इट अल्टीमेटली लॉस द कॉन्फिडेंस, क्योंकि चीफ मिनिस्टर ने खुद ही रिजाइन कर दिया तो चीजें चेंज हो गई. बट उन्होंने ये बोला है कि जो अभी करंट चीफ मिनिस्टर हैं एंड डिस्क्वालिफिकेशन की अगर हम बात करें तो डिस्क्वालिफिकेशन प्रोसीडिंग्स की जा सकती है बिकॉज जो करंट चीफ मिनिस्टर है ही डिफेक्टेड फ्रॉम द earlier political party which was there in power. So इसका मतलब यही है कि जो current government है it is going to continue in power for now, and governor had no objective material on the basis of which he could doubt the confidence of the incumbent government. So उस point of time पे governor के पास कोई भी ऐसा objective material या कोई substantive basis nahi tha for calling that trust vote. So floor test cannot be used as a means to settle your differences within a political party. And governor erred in concluding कि Mr. Thackeray had lost the support. So it was just आप बोल सकते हो on the basis of your own assumptions the floor test was called for. So जो discretion है to call for a floor test, it is not an unfettered discretion. कि ये नहीं कि आपका जब भी मन किया यू विल कॉल फॉर अ ट्रस्ट वोट. दिस इज नॉट योर डिस्क्रिशन एंड द कोर्ट सेड कि इट कुड नॉट क्वॉश द वॉलंटरी रेजिग्नेशन ऑफ द चीफ मिनिस्टर मिस्टर ठाकरे एंड दस रीइंस्टेट हिज एमवीए गवर्नमेंट. सो सिंस चीफ मिनिस्टर ने खुद अपने आप वॉलंटरली रिजाइन किया था तो उसमें सुप्रीम कोर्ट कुछ नहीं कर सकता है इन ऑर्डर टू इंश्योर द अर्लियर गवर्नमेंट बैक इन पावर. देन एक और सुप्रीम कोर्ट की जजमेंट आई है रिगार्डिंग दिल्ली गवर्नमेंट वर्सेस द यूनियन गवर्नमेंट. इसकी हमने कल बात भी करी थी. तो सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने ये बोला है कि दिल्ली गवर्नमेंट इट हैज द कंट्रोल ओवर द ऑफिसर्स. सो यहाँ पे ब्यूरोक्रेसी के ऊपर कंट्रोल की बात की जा रही थी. दिस वाज द इशू है. सो इन अ ब्लो टू द सेंटर सुप्रीम कोर्ट इट गेव द दिल्ली गवर्नमेंट द पावर टू मेक द लॉज and wield control over bureaucrats deputed to its departments while declaring the civil service officers they are politically neutral professionals who serve the people and they are not serving the political parties. So this was very clearly stated by the Supreme Court, and a constitutionally entrenched and democratically elected government, it needs to have the control over its administration. So that's why the power or the control goes in the hands of the Delhi government and not the center. So administration की अगर आप composition की बात करें तो it comprises of several public officers who are posted in services of a particular government irrespective of whether or not that government was involved in their recruitment. So Supreme Court की judgment के बाद here we are seeing different statements by the Chief Minister of Delhi. So he says कि officials जिन्होंने काम को रोकने की कोशिश करी they will now pay. And CM says कि Delhi government earlier it had the responsibility without power. Now it has responsibility with power. Big reshuffle in city bureaucracy that is on the cards. And he also promises that work in the capital will happen now 10 times faster. And that's a huge win for the people of Delhi also. So Delhi Assembly Speaker, he also says that officials jo hain, they will have to work properly as the matter of transfers and postings has now come under the Delhi government. So what are you trying to say कि अब since Delhi government के अंदर control आ जाता है तो अब आपको अच्छे से काम करना पड़ेगा. तो क्या पहले ऐसा नहीं था या पहले कुछ we can say कि कुछ favors किए जाते थे. So that is just one indication which it can be interpreted in this manner also. Again regarding the Delhi versus the center, Supreme Court ने बोला कि LG जो है he or she does not have the sweeping executive powers. So Delhi, it is obviously a unique case, unique setup hai. It follows an asymmetric federal model of governance. So center should remain within its boundaries, says the Constitution Bench, which was headed by the Chief Justice of India. So center jo hai, it needs to remain within its boundaries. एंड एलजी के पास भी अगर हम एलजी की भी बात करें तो ही और शी डज नॉट हैव द स्वीपिंग एग्जीक्यूटिव पावर्स ओवर द नेशनल कैपिटल. कि पहले ये इशू था कि हर एक इशू को आप आगे प्रेसिडेंट को रेफर कर देते थे, तो इसके ऊपर भी सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने बोला कि दिस इज नॉट एक्सेप्टेबल कि आप हर एक इशू को आगे प्रेसिडेंट को रेफर कर रहे हो. So center should be mindful of the unique asymmetric federal model of the governance adopted for Delhi. So it's a kind of an asymmetric federal model, all right? So it's a keyword. You can keep this in your mind. And Constitution Bench, which is led by CGI, held ki LG can exercise the executive power on behalf of the center only in 3 areas of public order, police and land in Delhi, as it is also mentioned in Article 239 AA. All right. So this is the article that is related to the Union Territory of Delhi. And जब हम बात करते हैं LG की executive power की, that is exercised on the basis of center only. So that is only applicable for 3 areas, that is public order, land and police. And if there is a difference between LG and that of the Council of Ministers of the Government of the National Capital Territory, then he should act in accordance with the procedure laid down in the transaction of business rules. So then accordingly, he or she needs to act. एंड जब हम बात करते हैं पार्लियामेंट और जब कोई लॉ इनैक्ट करता है ग्रांटिंग एग्जीक्यूटिव पावर ऑन एनी सब्जेक्ट which is within the domain of NCTD, the executive power of the LG that can also be modified to the specific extent provided in that particular law. So, जो executive power है LG की, it can be modified by the parliament. This means that any change in the LG's ambit of power should be supported by a parliamentary legislation, which is again a subject of judicial review by the court also. So court referred to section 49 of the GNCTD Act, which mandates that LG and the Delhi Council of Ministers, they need to comply with particular directions issued by the president on specific occasions only. And the court also noted sui generis, which means special status, which is given to Delhi, said कि जो cooperative federalism है, that was key to meaningful governance of the capital. So cooperative federalism, that's important. Agar administration, the government and the governance needs to, work in a proper, in a constitutional manner. So cooperative federalism is the way ahead. So there's going to be an aquamarine park, and it's going to come up in Telangana. So bids have been invited for selection of the developers. So it would be, when we talk about the specific location, so it would be in the Kotwal Guda area, which is near Hyderabad. So it is in the state of Telangana. So आप फाइंड आउट कर सकते हो क्या इंडिया में और ऐसे एक्वा मरीन पार्क्स हैं या नहीं, and that's how it will look once it is completed and open to the public. Coming to the editorial page, so firstly, this article, it is talking about problem with India's multi-alignment stand. So जब हम फॉरेन पॉलिसी की बात करते हैं रशिया यूक्रेन वॉर के बाद स्पेसिफिकली इंडिया ने एक पर्टिकुलर साइड नहीं लिया है. So that's what here it is being referred to as the multi-alignment stand of India. We are trying to balance between the Western world, or we can say the US and Russia. So China का जो recent mediation efforts हमने देखे to resolve the Ukraine crisis have once again spotlighted India's approach to this conflict resolution. So by holding the NATO eastward expansion responsible for instigating this Russia-Ukraine war, by painting America as the biggest obstacle to ceasefire, and by exploiting the differences among the Western countries regarding the extent of support to Ukraine, by further cementing the Beijing-Moscow relationship and ensuring survival of Vladimir Putin regime, China has effectively positioned itself in opposition to the American approach. So this is not how India views its role in resolving this conflict. So obviously, China की approach बहुत ही ज़्यादा different है, and that's all the changes जो in short में एमी हमने introduction में mention किए. So इंडिया की अप्रोच को अगर हम समझने की कोशिश करें तो इंडिया has increasingly used varied symbolic instruments of power to enhance our soft power appeal. And Prime Minister now he projects India as the mother of democracies and as a moral force to enforce the global peace. So in sharp contrast to the Chinese first outreach last month to Ukraine president since the Russian invasion, Indian Prime Minister has spoken to Mr. Zelensky many times. And October, December की बात करें last year, so Prime Minister in his telephonic conversation with Mr. Zelensky had expressed India's solidarity with Ukraine while extending support for peace efforts. So ऐसे phone पे conversations बहुत बार हुई है, and our Prime Minister said that today's era is not of war. So even US Secretary, he felt compelled to describe this widely reported remark as significant. So Washington, it understands the importance of India's continuous engagement with Ukraine because that is an important way of bringing New Delhi's response to the Ukraine war into alignment with its own. सो ये यूएसए का मानना है एंड जियो पॉलिटिक्स अगर हम इंडो पैसिफिक की बात करें एंड द यूक्रेन कॉन्फ्लिक्ट दे आर इन मेनी वेज इंटरकनेक्टेड ऑल्सो सो वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट स्टेटमेंट कल हमने इसके बारे में बात भी करी थी कि नेटो इट इज अगेन गेटिंग स्ट्रॉन्गर तो किस तरीके से जो जियो पॉलिटिक्स के डायनेमिक्स हैं दे आर गेटिंग रीअलाइंड दे आर गेटिंग रीऑर्डर्ड एंड उसमें आर्कटिक काउंसिल का भी रोल आ गया था आर्कटिक रीजन का भी रोल आ गया था हमने यूरोप की बात करी हाउ like things have changed between Europe and Russia and then Russia and China की closeness increase हो रही है how the western world sees it so ये सारी चीजें हमने कल बात करी थी and जब हम इंडो पैसिफिक और यूक्रेन कॉन्फ्लिक्ट की बात करते तो उसके बीच में भी रिलेशन है they are also connected all right so we may like while it may have given New Delhi some diplomatic space as far as the war in Ukraine and the global stand they are concerned, but it may not be sufficient for India to try to play the role of a mediator between Russia and Ukraine. And we see that India, it refuses to take a strong moral position on Russia's violation of Ukraine's sovereignty. तो ऐसा कोई इंडिया का strong stand हमें अभी तक नहीं दिखाई दिया है as far as the Russia-Ukraine conflict is concerned, या particularly when we talk about our moral position. सो इंडिया का जो स्टैंड इन्फ्लुएंस किया गया है सबसे ज्यादा जो हमारे नेशनलिस्ट आइडियाज हैं दे हैव ऑलवेज इन्फ्लुएंस्ड द इंडियन स्टेट कंट्रीब्यूटिंग टू देयर फर्दर प्रोलिफरेशन इन सोसाइटी एंड द पॉलिटी सो चॉइसेस ऑफ अगर हम विश्व गुरु की बात करें फ्रेज व्हिच वाज बाय मिस Daporova, if I am like wrongly pronouncing it, so I'm sorry for that. So it is not accidental as it is at the core of even the incumbent government's nationalist foreign policy discourse when we talk about India. So contemporary silence of Vishwaguru's image, which builds on historical trends in India's political thought, seeking to emphasize the distinctiveness of the country's cultural ethos and civilizational values, that also highlights the unique nature of soft power in the foreign policy debates as far as India is concerned. So we are using our soft power, and that is simultaneously ubiquitous, means it is present almost everywhere at all the time, and it's ambiguous also at the same time. So that is accepted as significant, yet it is narrow in its policy impact. So जब हम soft power and policy impact की बात करते हैं, so that is very narrow, but it's not like that strong or that effective, या इतना useful नहीं है. So it should be very clearly understood as any other form of non-material power, which interacts with the material resources or the hard power, either enlarging their impact or making up for their absence. All right. So soft power, it is being called for a non-material power. So there is lack of hard power. So India lacks the hard power. It has been acknowledged by Mohan Bhagwat also, who is the chief of RSS. So the ideological fountainhead of India's ruling political dispensation, chief of RSS. So India lacks the hard power. So यहाँ पे उनका पर्सनल व्यू आ जाता है. He argued कि Russia attacked Ukraine. It is being opposed, but nobody is ready to stop Russia because Russia has power and it threatens. So we see that while New Delhi, it has expressed its disapproval of the Ukraine war, it has avoided taking a clear position in many UN resolutions regarding this issue. So कोई clear stand India का कोई strong stand अभी तक visible नहीं है. And जब हम बात करें UN resolutions की, which was particularly related to this war, तो उसमें भी India की कोई clear position हमें नहीं दिखी है, नहीं समझ में आई है. So this may be understandable as India has often taken an evasive position on conflicts that involve its traditional allies. So traditional allies में Russia, US दोनों हैं. So we have always like taken an evasive position when we even talk about the history, such instances in history. So critics, they are not unreasonable in arguing that this ambiguity does not behove a nation aspiring to become a permanent member of the UNSC, which implies the commitment to speak as a global voice against the territorial aggression and rights violations, similar to what Russia has unleashed on Ukraine. So it's very important to come out clearly at the global लेवल एंड अगर आप यूएनएससी के परमानेंट मेंबर बनना चाहते हो तो क्रिटिक्स का मानना ये है कि जो एम्बिगुटी दिखाई दे रही है इंडिया के स्टैंड में इट इज नॉट बेसिकली इट वुड नॉट बी सपोर्टिंग या it is not expected from any member country या permanent member of UNSC. तो यहाँ पे थोड़ा हम बात कर सकते हैं कॉन्फ्लिक्ट की. So democracies, they enjoy legitimacy globally, and this legitimacy, it can transpose an authoritarian ruler's use of force into violence against the population. So Ukraine is seen as a victim, which is resisting the aggression from an authoritarian neighbor, that's Russia. So जैसे हमने start किया था कि pursuit of multi-alignment may have given New Delhi some diplomatic space in the ongoing war in Ukraine. However, it may not be sufficient for India to try to play the role of a mediator between Russia and Ukraine. So India currently lacks the material resources to match the extent of the China's economic and military potential. So through his charm of offensive of phony peace diplomacy, Mr. Xi's primary aim is to discourage Mr. Zelensky to launch the much discussed counteroffensive so that Russia's dependency on China rises further. So यहाँ पे China अपने फायदे के लिए भी कुछ steps ले रहा है, कोशिश कर रहा है, and it is driven by the sunk cost fallacy. Mr. Putin has unleashed forces that have already done immense damage to the Russia's global standing and offended most of the democratic world also. So thus the Modi government must ensure that India's refusal to condemn Russian belligerence and continued increase in the import of the Russian fuel is not interpreted as a pro-Moscow approach. So we need to, bring this thing very clearly at the global level. And India's ties with Russia, they are likely to be on a downward spiral also. So piecemeal distancing from Russia will take a bit longer as New Delhi struggles to find some maneuvering space in the emerging nexus between Russia and China. So even like that's important, that's of concern for India when we see that Russia, China, their closeness, their relationship is getting much more stronger. So here again, this article is regarding the legalization, the demand for the legalization of the same-sex marriage. So marriage for all, even if for a few. Here in reality show Fabulous Lives of Borrowed Lives. Okay, so यहाँ पे mentioned and it's not an important thing for us. So common threads, if we talk about the common threads, so parliamentary debate minutes, former member of parliament, Vijay Lakshmi Pandit, features as one of the bill's proponents. So she predicted that law would not have many immediate takers, but that an emancipated next generation would demand the right to choose their partners. So इस चीज को पहले ही conceive कर लिया गया था. So she conceived the civil union law as a calculated, rational decision where a freedom willfully granted is better than a freedom that is taken. So this is from the 1954 Lok Sabha debates. So like other women representatives, she also believed that the proposed law could improve the lives of women. But एक व्यू ये भी था कि if you allow the citizens to marry anyone of their choice, that could potentially lead to collapse of the society and the civilization also. So एक व्यू ये भी था. So Bill's divorce provisions जो थे, in particular, they had raised the fears of proliferation of the sexual desires. The question of queer unions was also briefly touched upon back then, and with homophobic remarks which were made. So other common thread that often resurfaces even today is that securing more rights and visibility for a plurality of identities and desires is in some way imposing the lifestyle of a few onto a presumed majority that is not represented in these struggles. So yeah, basically historical context they are mentioned, and unlike that far-reaching reform bill, expanding the legal rights to the LGBTQ community is not directly relevant to those who did not identify as queer or can in principle disengage from the debate. And yet, as the reactions to the court proceedings they have shown, Indian polity and society still struggles with the idea of marriage reform and individual choice. So still the same struggle goes on even today also. So almost 70 years, after 70 years, the Special Marriage Act still has fewer takers due to the political campaigns, bureaucratic overreach, and the general misconception that it only caters to interreligious couples. And a study of this law's implementation discredits the doomsday predictions of those who continue to oppose marriage reform. So social transformations, they're not easy, and laws in a vacuum, they are unlikely to disrupt the lives of vast majorities. So some citizens may not be prepared for the marriage equality, just as some are not open to the intercaste marriages and intercommunity marriages. But as Pandit Nehru had argued in 1954, the law should hold out more potential than the public imagination allows for and should be aimed at improving the lives of the more marginalized sections. So affording rights to a sexual minority, even if it is a minority, reaffirms the rights of the citizenry as a whole. So here in this picture, you can see a Cham Lama performance on the auspicious occasion of Buddha Jayanti in Lahore in Himachal Pradesh. Monks in elaborate mask, headgear, and colorful costumes, they dance slowly to the music played also by monks using traditional instruments like drums and cymbals. So it's believed that Cham dance जो है, it is performed to exorcise evil spirits and demons. All right, so celebration of victory of good over evil. So here you can just like remember this thing, jam dance coming from Himachal Pradesh, and drums and cymbals they are used, and it's celebrated on the occasion of Buddha Jayanti. And the purposes, or basically, we celebrate the victory of good over evil. So यहाँ पे again it is regarding जो issue महाराष्ट्र में था उससे regarding Supreme Court की judgment Sena versus Sena. So why did the court state the call of the then Maharashtra governor to initiate a trust vote was not justified? इसके पीछे क्या Supreme Court ने reasoning दी? Can the court reinstate the Uddhav Thackeray government now? तो ये हम देख चुके हैं, no, because he voluntarily resigned, तो उसमें Supreme Court कुछ नहीं कर सकता. Can the courts rule on disqualification petitions? Yes, that is now legible. And what has it said on the speaker's role? तो speakers का क्या, जो स्टेट असेंबली का स्पीकर रहते हैं उसका क्या रोल रहेगा? So ये हमारे examination perspective के लिए भी this topic is very very important. So how did the case land in the Supreme Court? So last year, Uddhav Thackeray led MBA government was toppled and replaced by another government comprising a faction of Shiv Sena, which claimed to be the real Sena. So BJP and several independent MLAs. And we see that leader of the breakaway Sena faction, Eknath Shinde, became the chief minister back then. So उस point of time पे ऐसे चीजें quickly they changed up, and that's how even a new government came up. So पहली petition file की गई by Mr. Shinde last June after notices they were issued by the then Deputy Speaker of the Maharashtra Assembly against 40 rebel MLAs under the 10th schedule. So 10th schedule is regarding anti-defection law, which deals with disqualification on the grounds of defection. So इससे regarding जब notice issue किए गए to the people who had resigned from the political party from the Shiv Sena, तो उस point of time पे उनको disqualification के लिए notices issue किए गए, तो उस point of time पे पहली petition file की गई. So then we see कि जो election था of the new speaker that was held and it was also again challenged. So Constitution Bench of Chief Justice of India had reserved the judgment on 16th of March and 11th of May based on the 5 petitions and arguments made by both the parties. Court gave its ruling on questions of law that arose in this case in their judgment. So can the Supreme Court decide a disqualification petition or not? क्या Supreme Court decide कर सकता है या नहीं? So Speaker is the authority to adjudicate the petitions for disqualification under the 10th schedule. So जो Constitution बात करता है that is 10th schedule के under, which is anti-defection law की बात करता है, तो Speaker of the State Assembly main power उनके पास है. So petitioners, they wanted the court to give its decision on the issue of disqualification of Mr. Shinde and his supporters. So petitioners की demand ये थी कि court अपना final verdict दे on disqualification and not the Speaker of the State Assembly. But court said कि it cannot ordinarily adjudicate the petitions for disqualification under this schedule. So there are no extraordinary circumstances in the instant case that warrant the exercise of jurisdiction by this court to adjudicate on disqualification petition. So ये Supreme Court ने clearly mention किया कि जो ordinary jurisdictional powers है regarding disqualification वो court के पास नहीं है, and अभी जो present instant है उसमें भी ऐसा कोई extraordinary circumstance नहीं है कि Supreme Court को इस चीज के ऊपर decide करना पड़े. So Speaker must decide the disqualification petitions within a reasonable period. So यहाँ पे ये चीज भी important है कि कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में कोई टाइम फ्रेम मेंशन्ड नहीं है कि इतने दिनों के अंदर आपको स्पीकर को डिसीजन लेना पड़ेगा जब हम डिस्क्वालिफिकेशन की बात कर रहे हैं. तो यहाँ पे आप देख सकते हो इट इज रिटन विद इन अ रीजनेबल पीरियड ऑफ टाइम. ऑलराइट, सो कोर्ट सेड कि एन एमएलए हैज द राइट टू पार्टिसिपेट इन द प्रोसीडिंग्स ऑफ द हाउस रिगार्डलेस ऑफ द पेंडेंसी ऑफ एनी पिटिशंस फॉर देयर डिस्क्वालिफिकेशन. So MLAs तब तक participate कर सकते हैं and validity of proceedings of the House in the interregnum is not subject to the outcome of the disqualification petition. So that is also important. So जो floor test किया गया उस टाइम पे क्या वो justified था या नहीं, जिसकी वजह से the government got toppled and then a new government came to power. So court ने clearly बोला है कि governor was not justified in calling upon Mr. Thackeray to prove his majority on the floor of the house because उनके पास कोई ऐसा reason नहीं था which was based on objective material for taking this decision of, you know, basically floor test का जो decision दिया गया by the governor. सो कोर्ट ने ये भी बोला एट द सेम टाइम कि जो स्टेटस को एंटे है उसको हम रिस्टोर नहीं कर सकते हैं क्योंकि जो पहले वाले चीफ मिनिस्टर थे मिस्टर ठाकरे ही डिड नॉट फेस द फ्लोर टेस्ट एंड उन्होंने चीफ मिनिस्टर की पोस्ट से रिजाइन कर दिया. तो द गवर्नर इट सेड इट वाज जस्टिफाइड इन इनवाइटिंग मिस्टर शिंदे टू फॉर्म द गवर्नमेंट. सो नेक्स्ट फैक्शन शिंदे गवर्नमेंट को इनवाइट किया गया टू फॉर्म द गवर्नमेंट. तो उसमें कोई मतलब प्रॉब्लम या कोई ऐसा मिस्टेक नहीं थी या कोई ऐसा गलत डिसीजन नहीं था ऑन द पार्ट ऑफ द गवर्नर. सो स्टेटस को एंटे मतलब आज की पोजीशन में जैसे आज सुप्रीम कोर्ट इस केस को सुन रहा है तो क्या सुप्रीम कोर्ट स्टेटस को एंटे क्या जो अभी करंट गवर्नमेंट है उससे पहले जो पोजीशन थी जो दूसरी गवर्नमेंट पावर पावर में थी, क्या उसको सुप्रीम कोर्ट रिस्टोर कर सकता है या नहीं? तो उसको हम बोल रहे हैं स्टेटस को एंटे, बिफोर द थिंग्स चेंज्ड, क्या हम उसी स्टेटस को वापस से रिस्टोर कर सकते हैं या नहीं? तो वो नहीं कर सकते हैं, क्योंकि जो पहले वाली गवर्नमेंट थी उन्होंने ना तो फ्लोर टेस्ट को फेस किया, एंड जो चीफ मिनिस्टर थे उन्होंने खुद ही रिजाइन कर दिया अपनी पोजीशन से, तो इसमें सुप्रीम कोर्ट कैन नॉट हेल्प। सुप्रीम कोर्ट की रूलिंग में अगर हम बात करें, सुप्रीम कोर्ट का क्या मानना है जब हम बोलते हैं रिगार्डिंग द रोल ऑफ द पॉलिटिकल पार्टी इन रिलेशन टू द लेजिस्लेचर पार्टी? So questions arose on whose whip is binding, if the whip appointed by the political party and the one that is acting on behalf of the legislator party, that is the Shinde group in this case, they give different instructions to the members. So कौन सी विप एक्चुअल मतलब मानी जाएंगी, किसके डिसीजन ज्यादा माने जाएंगे? So Shinde faction argued that it is the legislative party that appoints the whip, and court disagreed on this. So to hold that it is the legislative party which appoints the whip would be to sever the figurative unumbilical cord which connects a member of the house to the political party. So it would mean that legislators, they could rely on the political party for the purpose of setting them up for election, that their campaign would be based on the strengths of the political party and its promises and policies, that they could appeal to the voters on the basis of their affiliation with the party, but that they can later disconnect themselves entirely from that very party and be able to function as a group of MLAs which no longer owes even a hint of allegiance to the political party. So court ने ये ruling की कि discretion to vote in a particular manner or abstain is issued by the political party and not legislator party. So whip basically political party की ही मानी जाएगी. So दोनों whip भी and leader of opposition, leader of the party in the house, it should be appointed only by the political party, not legislative party. All right. So whip भी and leader of जो party रहेगा house में, state assembly में, वो appoint किया जाएगा by the political party. So the speaker shall recognize the whip and the leader who are duly authorized by the Shiva Sena political party with reference to the provisions of the party's constitution after conducting an inquiry in this regard and in keeping with the principles discussed in this judgment. So बहुत ही important judgment है, इसको समझना important है, क्या Supreme Court का interpretation है, all of that is important. So what is the stalemate over USA's debt ceiling? So why is there a debt ceiling for the USA? What are the consequences of a debt default to the global economy? So obviously global economy पे इसका impact हो सकता है अगर कोई मतलब consequence की अगर हम बात करें of a debt default. So USA में जब हम बात करते हैं debt ceiling की, तो एक fixed limit है which has been decided and उसके beyond the debt cannot cross. So US Treasury Secretary notified the Congress last week the US, that is the country, it could default on its debt as early as June 1 if Republican-dominated House of Representatives and President Joe Biden's White House did not reach a consensus to raise or suspend the debt ceiling. तो अगर ये नहीं किया गया तो it might be possible कि USA might default on its debt. So यूएसए की डेट सीलिंग क्या है, पहले इसको समझते हैं. So जब फेडरल गवर्नमेंट स्पेंड्स मोर देन इट ब्रिंग्स इन, मतलब आपका एक्सपेंडिचर ज्यादा है कंपेयर टू योर रेवेन्यू, इट रन्स अप अ बजट डेफिसिट. तो उस केस में बजट डेफिसिट हो जाता है एंड इट देन हैज टू बोरो द मनी टू मीट द फाइनेंशियल ऑब्लिगेशंस. सो आपकी इनकम या आपके रेवेन्यू कम है, आपके एक्सपेंडिचर ज्यादा है, तो जो गैप हो गया उसका मतलब उतना अमाउंट ऑफ मनी आपको बोरो करना पड़ेगा, and that is the debt. So government borrows by creating and selling the debt securities like bonds to US investors को bonds बेची जाती हैं, companies को बेची जाती है, banks buy कर सकते हैं उन bonds को, pension funds, foreign investors and countries. So largest part of these, they are owned by the US federal government itself, which keeps the money for social security schemes, Medicare, and federal pensions and so on. So the administration and Congress, they decide on the taxation and kya spending rahegi and the collection of taxes and the borrowing of the funds. It is done by US Treasury Department. बट कांग्रेस ने साथ ही साथ एक लिमिट भी क्रिएट कर दी व्हेन इट कम्स टू बोरोइंग. सो राइट नाउ दैट इज एट 11.5 बिलियन डॉलर्स. सो ये ही इसी को हम बोल रहे हैं डेट सीलिंग है कि इससे ज्यादा आप नहीं बोरो कर सकते हो. So this created a debt ceiling that could only be raised by the approval of the Congress. So the debt ceiling की जो limit है उसको increase करना है तो once the Congress approves it वो तभी possible हो सकती है. So US government has hit or it has come close to hitting this debt ceiling multiple times. So USA का जो debt level है it is very close to this level of 11.5 billion dollars. So उससे regarding concerns आ रहे हैं कि अगर ये सीलिंग हिट हो गई या तो आप इसको इंक्रीज कर दो और या आप इसको रिमूव कर दो, अदरवाइज यूएसए वो डिफॉल्ट कर सकता है ऑन इट्स डेट. तो ये मेन प्रॉब्लम है. तो कॉन्सिक्वेंसेस क्या होंगे अगर यूएस डिफॉल्ट एक रियलिटी होती आने वाले टाइम में. तो एनालिस्ट से कि देयर इज नो सेट पोस्ट डिफॉल्ट सिनेरियो सिंस यूएस इट हैज नेवर एक्चुअली डिफॉल्टेड ऑन इट्स डेट बिफोर. मतलब आज तक ऐसा कभी नहीं हुआ है कि यूएसए ने डिफॉल्ट किया है ऑन इट्स डेट. एंड दे हैव वार्नड हाउएवर ऑफ अ कैटास्ट्रोफिक सिचुएशन फॉर द अमेरिकन एंड द ग्लोबल फाइनेंशियल मार्केट्स. अगर ऐसा होता है तो government cannot make the interest payments to the domestic and the foreign investors who own its debt securities. It could plunge the globe into a financial crisis and like it would be kind of an unthinkable event of a US default, and it could lead to another downgrade of the US credit worthiness by agencies, large scale job losses, weakening of dollar होगा, stock sell-offs किए जाएंगे, rise in the cost of borrowing for the US government. So ये सारे repercussions हैं and specifically ये USA के context में ही mention किए गए हैं. तो अगर ऐसा कुछ हुआ तो इट वुड ट्रिगर अ लॉट ऑफ थिंग्स एंड चीजों को फिर कंट्रोल करना बहुत मुश्किल हो जाएगा. सो दैट्स द पिक्चर राइट नाउ जब हम यूएस डेट की बात करते हैं. सो अगेन सुप्रीम कोर्ट जजमेंट जो हमने स्टार्टिंग में बात करी रिगार्डिंग द दिल्ली गवर्नमेंट इन द सेंटर, एलजी की क्या पावर है, हाउ ही और शी नीड्स टू बिहेव, वो हम ऑलरेडी बात कर चुके हैं. आप लोग एक बार इस आर्टिकल को यू कैन जस्ट गो थ्रू वंस and that would make things much more clearer to you. So let's move forward. So US engages with India on human rights as per White House. So US encourages all the countries to uphold their human rights obligations and the commitments which are there and to work towards building inclusive societies. तो ये हमने पहले भी बात करी है जब हम रेसलिंग फेडरेशन ऑफ इंडिया की बात करते हैं. तो देयर इज नो इंटरनल कंप्लेंट्स कमेटी एंड इससे रिगार्डिंग एनएचआरसी ने इशू किया है एक नोटिस एंड वेरियस स्पोर्ट्स फेडरेशंस दे हैव बीन टोल्ड टू सबमिट द डिटेल्ड रिपोर्ट्स विद इन 4 weeks. एंड बहुत सारी ऐसे स्पोर्ट्स फेडरेशन है जहाँ पे इंटरनल कंप्लेंट्स कमेटी इज मिसिंग. And this is one of the part of the Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act of 2013. So it's basically, we can say, this is violation of this act of this law. So the move comes amid the ongoing protest. जो wrestlers का protest, it still continues. So CJ says कि if you allow an MP or an MLA who is facing disqualification under the anti-defection law to participate in a floor test caused by his own doings will defeat the very purpose of the 10th schedule. कि ऐसे एमएलए और एमपी जो डिस्क्वालिफिकेशन को फेस कर रहे हैं तो आप उनको अगर साथ ही साथ अलाउ कर देते हो टू पार्टिसिपेट इन द फ्लोर टेस्ट ऑल्सो एट द सेम टाइम, दोनों चीजें हो रही है तो जो पर्पस है ऑफ 10th शेड्यूल ऑफ एंटी डिफेक्शन लॉ वो डिफीट हो जाएगा. क्योंकि अगर आप मतलब फ्लोर टेस्ट में ही पार्टिसिपेट कर गए तो फायदा क्या हुआ फिर 10th शेड्यूल का. So allowing such MLAs to attend a trust vote would amount to legitimizing a constitutional sin. So that is very clearly stated by the Chief Justice of India. And आज हमने काफी बात करी regarding this सुप्रीम कोर्ट की जो जजमेंट रही एंड और जो बाकी एस्पेक्ट्स हैं लाइक सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने भी बोला कि गवर्नर्स दे कैन नॉट प्ले अ रोल इन द इंट्रा पार्टी डिस्प्यूट्स। सो जो पार्टी के अंदर डिस्प्यूट्स चल रहे हैं आप उसमें पार्टिसिपेट नहीं कर सकते हो। दिस इज फॉर द गवर्नर ऑफ द स्टेट। एंड जैसे डिस्क्वालिफिकेशन की बात की गई कि फाइनल अथॉरिटी स्पीकर ऑफ द हाउस है एंड सुप्रीम कोर्ट बेसिकली ऑर्डिनरली सुप्रीम कोर्ट कोई डिसीजन अभी के लिए नहीं ले सकता है व्हेन इट कम्स टू डिस्क्वालिफिकेशन पिटिशंस। सो दैट वाज आल्सो मेड क्लियर। So again, this article is talking about the drugs and the demographics of the state of Manipur. So state government source attributes the current wave of tensions between the majority जो Metis community है which are non-tribals and they reside in the plains, and conflict is between the Metis community and the Kukis. So Kuki is the tribal community which reside in the hilly areas. So basically we see to take actions taken by the administration since 2017-18 against the poppy cultivation in the hill districts. So इससे regarding जो tribal population है, they were having the concerns, and this was we can say one of the reasons of the conflict also. तो trigger तो ये इस वजह से हुआ कि there was a demand by the non-tribals या majority Metis community कि उनको scheduled tribe का status दिया जाना चाहिए, but obviously वो already majority में है। तो tribals का ये concern हो गया कि अगर उनको scheduled tribe status भी मिल गया तो उनको और ज्यादा benefits दिए जाएंगे, and जो interest है of the tribal community जो minority में है जो hilly areas में रहते हैं उनके interest को या उनका मतलब जो राइट्स हैं वो वायलेट हो सकती हैं अगर ऐसे कोई सिचुएशन आगे होती है एंड इफ दे आर डिक्लेयर्ड एज टू बी शेड्यूल्ड ट्राइब्स। सो ये एक ट्रिगर पॉइंट था, बट ये नहीं कि सिर्फ एक इस रीजन की वजह से इतना ज्यादा बवाल हो गया इन द स्टेट ऑफ मणिपुर। So the government here, they were like taking actions against the drugs cultivation, poppy cultivation in the hill districts. तो एक उसकी वजह से भी जो tribals का concerns था, they were basically not happy with what the government was doing. So that was also one of the reasons behind this conflict. So अगर हम demographics की बात करें तो valley में basically where 10% of the Manipur's landmarks basically valley का है 10% of the landmass of Manipur state that is dominated by the non-tribals Metis, most of whom they are Hindus and who account for more than 64% of the population of the state, and they yield 40 of the state's 60 MLAs क्योंकि majority वो है population 64% है of the majority Metis community which are mostly Hindus. So अगर हम hill region की बात करें तो they make up 90% जोग्राफिकल एरिया हिली है मणिपुर स्टेट का, बट अगर हम पॉपुलेशन की बात करें तो ओनली 20 मेंबर्स जो हैं एमएलएज हैं दे कम फ्रॉम द हिली डिस्ट्रिक्ट्स या हिली रीजन्स ऑफ द मणिपुर, एंड वहां पे वी फाइंड ट्राइबल्स लाइक कुकीज व्हिच रेसाइड इन द हिली रीजन्स। तो सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने अपनी जजमेंट रिजर्व कर दी है रिगार्डिंग द सेम सेक्स मैरिज केस, एंड इससे रिगार्डिंग government had objected to the idea of the judicial declaration giving legal status to the same-sex relationships, saying that would result in confusion, especially in the personal laws and encroach on the legislative domain. So ये Supreme Court ने पहले ही clear कर दिया था कि final जो decision रहेगा whether it would be legal or it would be illegal या मतलब उसको recognize नहीं किया जाएगा, तो वो final बेसिकली जब हम पावर्स की बात करें तो लेजिस्लेटर की पावर है, एंड अगर सुप्रीम कोर्ट इस पे कोई फाइनल ऐसा डिसीजन ले लेता है तो इसकी वजह से कंफ्यूजन भी हो सकती है रिगार्डिंग द पर्सनल लॉज। सो इसलिए फाइनल अथॉरिटी रेस्ट विद द लेजिस्लेटर, एंड जो जुडिशियल रिव्यू वाली चीज है वो तो रेलेवेंट रहेगी रहेगी। सो देखते हैं इस पे क्या सुप्रीम कोर्ट की जजमेंट आएगी। वर्ल्ड पेज पे आते हुए, सो हेयर when we talk about the world page, world news, so Yemen peace push serious but next step क्या होगा that remains unclear। तो ईरान एंड सऊदी अरेबिया की राइजिंग क्लोजनेस के साथ वी आर सीइंग कि यमन में जो वॉर चल रहा है इट माइट कम टू एन एंड एंड सिचुएशन इंप्रूव हो सकती है। सो जो पीस टॉक्स की बात की जा रही है दैट ऑल ऑफ दैट इज वेरी सीरियस, बट आगे का जो प्लान है दैट इज नॉट क्लियर। एंड कल हमने देखा था कि आसियान इज कॉलिंग फॉर रिस्टोरेशन ऑफ पीस इन म्यांमार, सो इंडोनेशिया विडोडो सेज कि अभी कोई रियल प्रोग्रेस नहीं देखने को मिली है व्हेन वी टॉक अबाउट द म्यांमार्स पीस प्लान। सो इमरान खान को जो अरेस्ट किया गया था, पाकिस्तान के सुप्रीम कोर्ट का कहना ये है कि जो अरेस्ट किया गया, जिस तरीके से अरेस्ट किया गया दैट वाज इलीगल, एंड they've also ordered his release, so he would be set free, and a bench was headed by the chief justice asked him to present himself before the Islamabad High Court, and Supreme Court verdict it comes a day after the ISPR military's media wing said कि May 9 would go down in history as a dark chapter. So this was the verdict of their Supreme Court regarding his arrest. So 25 people, they have died as militants in Gaza, Israel, they trade fire. So even the situation is really very volatile and it's like not safe. जब हम इसराइल पैलेस्टीन की कॉन्फ्लिक्ट की बात करते तो गाजा स्ट्रिप एंड वेस्ट बैंक के बारे में आपको पता होना चाहिए। So Cairo, which is the capital of Egypt, has mediated in efforts towards a truce between Israel and the Islamic Jihad militant group, while France, Germany, Jordan, and Egypt, they called for an end to this violence. So rockets fire किए गए हैं दोनों साइड से, and which has led to killing 25 people. So violence, it has also flared in the occupied West Bank also, where the Israeli army has staged repeated raids, which have often flared into the street clashes also. So Gaza Strip and West Bank, दोनों के बारे में आपको पता होना चाहिए। लोकेशन कहाँ है, क्या ज्योग्राफी है पूरे एरिया की। WHO again it says कि monkeypox it is no longer a global health emergency, and कुछ दिन पहले COVID-19 के लिए भी सेम डिसीजन लिया गया था कि it is no longer a public health emergency. So it declared कि mpox, monkeypox no longer constitutes a global health emergency, and this is almost exactly a year after the disease formerly which was known as monkeypox started spreading globally. तो इसको rename किया गया है mpox, that's monkeypox, it's almost the same thing, one of the same thing. So we are seeing that cases they are sharply falling, and also emphasize कि disease it remains a threat, but ये नहीं बोल सकते कि cases कम हो रहे तो it is no more a threat. And particularly it's a threat in areas of Africa where it has been long been endemic. Finally, coming on the business page, so here तो GST e-invoicing की अगर हम बात करें तो that is going to include the smaller firms from 1st of August. So center lowers the mandatory e-invoicing filing threshold to rupees 5 crores in annual turnover. So earlier limit थी rupees 10 crores की. Now it is rupees 5 crores. So that's a move seen helping expand the tax net. So tax base को increase करने के लिए this limit has been reduced, and an automated return scrutiny module It has been rolled out by Central Board of Indirect Taxes, CBIC. So we see कि it's a move to basically expand the tax base and जिसकी वजह से आने वाले टाइम में revenue भी increase हो सके गवर्नमेंट का. So अगर हम automated return scrutiny module की बात करें तो this module it will enable the officers to carry out the scrutiny of the GST returns of the center administrative taxpayers selected on the basis of the data analytics and risks identified by the system. And in case the customers, they are accepting invoices from such vendors without e-invoice compliance, तो जो input tax credit है, वो उनको नहीं दिया जाएगा. So it would be denied, resulting in GST loss for them to the extent of 18% generally, which could like severely impact their bottom lines also. टेकिंग अप द मिंट न्यूज़पेपर. सो यहाँ पे हम देख रहे हैं, बात करेंगे अगेन पाकिस्तान के बारे में. पाकिस्तान इट इज इन फ्री फॉल. व्हाट डज इट मीन फॉर इंडिया? सो इट्स इम्पोर्टेंट कि इंडिया के लिए इसका क्या इम्प्लीकेशन है या इंडिया के लिए इसका क्या मतलब है. when we are seeing कि पाकिस्तान की इकोनॉमी, even the political situation, so they're not in a good state. So जब Imran Khan he was arrested, so it triggered a wave of protest across the Pakistan, culminating in Supreme Court ordering his release. So firstly, we see, so what is Pakistan's political crisis about? So we see कि after being turned out of the office last April, Imran Khan was the prime minister. So उसके बाद से his PTI party has worked ceaselessly to take on the government of the Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif. So right now he is the Prime Minister of Pakistan, and Imran Khan also like clashed repeatedly with the Pakistan's military, also often the ultimate power broker. It is like military in Pakistan. And last year, devastating floods were also witnessed, and major economic crises have made Prime Minister Sharif's government very unpopular. तो साथ ही साथ लाइक फ्लड्स भी थे एंड इकोनॉमिक क्राइसिस भी स्टार्ट हो गई, तो उसकी वजह से पॉलिटिकल सिचुएशन और खराब होगी. तो मिलिट्रीज क्लैशेस विद मिस्टर खान आल्सो पेंटेड द आर्म्ड फोर्सेस इन एन अनफ्लैटरिंग लाइट. सो इमरान खान आर्ग्यूबली पाकिस्तान मोस्ट पॉपुलर पॉलिटिशियन रहे हैं एंड ही इज कॉल्ड फॉर फ्रेश इलेक्शन. सो उनकी डिमांड है कि फ्रेश इलेक्शंस होने चाहिए which he believes will return him to the power. So यहाँ पे हमारे लिए इम्पोर्टेंट है कि इंडिया के लिए इसका क्या मतलब है. So is it going to like impact India or not is the important thing for us to understand. So Pakistan की जो domestic troubles हैं, they may trigger more activity across the line of control. तो एक ये concern है, and recent terrorist attacks in Kashmir, they have also dialed up the tensions. So at the end of the day, New Delhi has little control over which group comes out on the top, but it's unclear if the bilateral relationship on the rocks for some time will fundamentally change or not, regardless of who takes power in Islamabad. So divides over Kashmir and cross-border terrorism make a rapprochement unlikely. So that's going to be the concern for India. So finance minister says कि जो infrastructure investments हैं, they are going to be the focus for next 25 years. So she sends a message to investors as India sets the target to be a developed nation by 2047, when we'll be completing 100 years of independence. So building the infrastructure, attracting investments will be the key focus area for India over the next 25 years. And this is also told to the businesses so that जो उनका interest है, that also grows and they come up with much more investments into the Indian economy. So e-commerce policy की अगर हम बात करें, right now we are not having any such policy, so it's like close to release, and that's coming from DPIIT secretary. So much delayed e-commerce policy and consumer protection rules, they are in advanced stages of finalization and could be released soon. So policy, it would also have provisions for the open network for the digital commerce that seeks to democratize e-commerce by enabling the buyers and sellers to transact on a single platform. So जो e-commerce rules हैं and e-commerce policy है, they are going to be congruent with each other. And that's the idea. So exercise is at a fairly advanced stage. So we expect soon that it would be released. Coming to Financial Express. So यहाँ पे let's see what are the important topics today. So expectations यही है कि we'll be having a bumper wheat crop this year. Overall, जो wheat production है, that is likely to surpass the estimate of 112.18 million ton on account of better crop yields despite inclement weather, which is affecting the grains quality in some parts of the country. So let's see जब हमें मतलब actual numbers होंगे हमारे पास, so as to analyze कि कितना wheat harvest रहेगा. And कल हमने बात करी थी कि मतलब क्यों अभी भी wheat prices they are on the rise and higher level पे अभी भी क्यों चल रहे हैं, तो वो एक important चीज है. And we have like also talked about कि government how it can intervene to ensure कि prices नीचे आ जाए, and how like government के पास क्या 3 available options थे, तो वो भी हमने कल बात करी थी इससे regarding. GST e-invoicing की जो लिमिट रिड्यूस की गई है, this we've already taken up. So that's a repeat here. So e-commerce rules to align with the consumer law. So Finance Minister, she invites the Japanese investors to join India's growth story. अभी हमने देखा कि she said कि आने वाले 25 years में हमारा focus रहने वाला है on infrastructure and capital expenditure. So she has invited the Japanese investors to be a part of our growth story. So Japan right now, it is India's 5th largest source of FDI with a strong presence in automobile sector. So FDI from Japan, it was about $1.5 billion in the previous financial year. So India, it is focusing on skilling the people in the fast developing areas of artificial intelligence so that the young population can use it for innovative solutions. So we are focusing on skilling them, enhancing their skills regarding artificial intelligence technology. So talking about the National Technology Day, the Prime Minister says that over the last 9 years, we have laid a strong foundation so that India can move forward and make notable advancements in the field of technology. So इससे regarding we need to know कि क्या advancements हमने actually achieve किए the technology front. So rise of Indian capital investment impetus की बात करें तो not only the quantum of investment across the economy. Quantum means कि क्वांटिटी ऑफ इन्वेस्टमेंट डेफिनेटली इंक्रीज हुआ है, बट जो एफिशिएंसी है ऑफ द इंडियन कैपिटल दैट इज आल्सो राइजिंग एट द सेम टाइम। तो दोनों हमारे लिए बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है एंड इट्स एन वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग कि दोनों सेम टाइम पे हो रहे हैं। वी आर एबल टू अचीव दैट। क्वांटिटेटिवली भी हम ज्यादा अमाउंट ऑफ इन्वेस्टमेंट्स अट्रैक्ट कर पा रहे हैं एंड जो एफिशिएंसी है ऑफ इंडियन कैपिटल दैट इज आल्सो राइजिंग। सो जब आपसे कोई कुछ पूछे रिगार्डिंग कि अकॉर्डिंग टू यू व्हाट आर द बेस्ट इंडिकेटर्स ऑफ द इंडियन इकोनॉमी, सो सबसे पहले आप जीडीपी की बात करोगे, पर कैपिटा जीडीपी का बोलोगे, ग्रॉस कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन की बात करोगे, जीएनडीआई ग्रॉस सेविंग्स इन ट्रिलियन रुपीज, यहाँ पे मतलब डिफरेंट फिगर्स में मेंशन है, रेशियो मेंशन है। सो ये इंपॉर्टेंट इंडिकेटर्स ऑफ इंडियन इकोनॉमी। देन आप इन्फ्लेशन अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट की भी बात कर सकते हो। सो दैट्स इम्पोर्टेंट। एंड इसके अलावा यहाँ पे लाइक फिगर्स दे रखे हैं, तो अगर हम इनको समझने की कोशिश करें, ट्रेंड को समझे, तो सबसे पहले विल टॉक अबाउट द जीडीपी। सो हेयर इट इज गिवन इन ट्रिलियन रुपीज। सो फाइनेंशियल 2019 से वी हैव द फिगर्स। सो इट वाज रिकॉर्डेड एट 188.99 ट्रिलियन रुपीज बैक देन। उसके बाद इट सो एन इंक्रीज, फिर थोड़ा डिक्लाइन हुआ एंड राइट नाउ वी आर एट 234.71 ट्रिलियन रुपीज। एंड पर कैपिटा जीडीपी की बात करें तो इट वाज 1,42,000 इन फाइनेंशियल ईयर 2019। उसके बाद फिर इंक्रीज हुआ, पर डिक्लाइन हमें देखने को मिला है एंड अगेन देयर वाज एन इंक्रीज। सो राइट नाउ वी आर हैविंग पर कैपिटा जीडीपी ऑफ 1,71,000 रुपीज। ग्रॉस कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन, सो ग्रॉस कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन में हम बोल सकते हैं कि we're talking about investment. So it was 64 trillion rupees in financial year 2019. There was a decline, again decline, and now there was an increase in the previous financial year, and it stands at 73.61 trillion rupees. So there was the investment and gross capital formation. So GCF and the gross savings by institutional sector and ICOR. So ICOR is incremental capital output ratio. So this is one of the indicators जब हम efficiency of capital की बात करते हैं. So incremental capital output ratio क्या रहा, ये हमारे लिए बहुत ज़्यादा important है. तो financial year 2019 में incremental capital output ratio was 5.2. Then it increased to 7.8 and COVID-19 की वजह से it was minus 4.8. And again, previous financial year में we are at the level of 3.5. So this is for the incremental capital output ratio. So आपको लाइक मीनिंग भी पता होना चाहिए जब हम बात करते हैं इंक्रीमेंटल कैपिटल आउटपुट रेशियो की। सो इसमें बेसिकली अगर मैं आपको बताऊं कि इंक्रीमेंटल बोल रहे हो, वो इंक्रीमेंटल कैपिटल आउटपुट रेशियो की एक यूनिट ऑफ आउटपुट को प्रोड्यूस करने के लिए आपको कितना कैपिटल चाहिए होता है। सो उसकी एफिशिएंसी अकॉर्डिंगली डिसाइड की जाती है कि अगर आपको एक यूनिट ऑफ आउटपुट को प्रोड्यूस करने में लिए ज्यादा कैपिटल चाहिए तो आपकी एफिशिएंसी कम है, एंड अगर वन आउटपुट को प्रोड्यूस करने के लिए कम कैपिटल में आपका काम चल रहा है, कम कैपिटल यूज करके आप प्रोड्यूस कर पा रहे हो, तो आपकी एफिशिएंसी ऑफ प्रोडक्शन हाई है। ऑलराइट। फाइनली विल नॉट टेक अप इंडियन एक्सप्रेस न्यूज़पेपर। सो यहाँ पे अगेन सुप्रीम कोर्ट की जजमेंट्स की बात की गई है। दो इम्पोर्टेंट वर्डिक्ट कल हमें देखने को मिले एंड ये हम ऑलरेडी लाइक प्रॉपरली डिटेल में डिस्कस कर चुके हैं इन द हिंदू न्यूज़पेपर। सो विल नॉट रिपीट दिस हेयर एंड it is basically Supreme Court, it underlines the check and balance. So for Delhi and Mumbai both, it goes for both of them. गवर्नर का क्या रोल है, डिस्क्वालिफिकेशन से रिगार्डिंग क्या बोला गया, क्या इंटरप्रेट किया गया चीजों को बाय द सुप्रीम कोर्ट। सो दिस वाज अंडरस्टूड एंड कोऑपरेटिव फेडरलिज्म की बात की गई, जो दिल्ली में एसिमेट्रिक फेडरलिज्म एग्जिस्ट करता है मॉडल, उसमें बेसिकली कोऑपरेटिव फेडरलिज्म इज द वे फॉरवर्ड। So here we'll directly move on to the editorial page and we'll take up the explained section as well. So again, this is regarding Supreme Court judgment for the Delhi government and control over its bureaucracy. And this is for the Maharashtra में जो issue था. इसके अलावा तो सारे आर्टिकल्स आज सुप्रीम कोर्ट के जजमेंट के ऊपर ही हैं. एंड अगेन एक्सप्लेन सेक्शन में भी आज यही है. Okay, so court it backs Delhi in the long tussle with the center. What tilted the scales in Delhi government favor? So यहाँ पे थोड़ा डिटेल में समझते हैं कि दिल्ली की फेवर में ये जजमेंट कैसे गई, क्या रीजनिंग रही. So 5-judge constitution bench said कि verdict would further the basic structure of federalism, underline Delhi's unique status as the union territory. So issue क्या था वो तो हमें पता है. And what was the bone of contention? So limited issue for the consideration of this constitution bench, it only relates to the scope of the legislative and the executive powers of the center and the National Capital Territory of Delhi with respect to the term services. So simply put, court it had to decide कि क्या Delhi government या union government had the legislative and executive control over the capital's bureaucracy. So इस चीज के ऊपर उनको decide करना था. And court इतने उन्होंने interpret किया है clause number 3 of article 239 AA जो बात करता है special provisions with respect to Delhi of the article 239A of the constitution. So उसमें section basically clause 3 है, उसको सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने इंटरप्रेट किया है. So it reads कि subject to the provisions of this constitution, legislative assembly shall have the power to make laws for the whole or any part of the NCT with respect to any of the matters enumerated in the state list or the concurrent list, insofar as any such matter is applicable to union territories except the matters with respect to. So basically clause 3 is this. And सेंटर का क्या आर्ग्यूमेंट था? सो सेंटर आर्ग्यूमेंट वाज दैट इन 2018 की जो रूलिंग थी सुप्रीम कोर्ट की, कोर्ट डिड नॉट एनालाइज टू क्रूशियल फ्रेजेस ऑफ दिस आर्टिकल. So first was insofar as any such matter is applicable to union territories, and second was ki subject to the provisions of this constitution. So in though ye cheeze missing thi 2018 wali judgments, center argued कि since no union territory has the power over the services, so Delhi too could not exercise such power. ये center की argument थी. So कोर्ट ने क्या डिसाइड किया? फर्स्टली द कोर्ट कंक्लूडेड कि जो दिल्ली है अंडर द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल स्कीम, इट्स अ सुई जनरस, मतलब एक यूनिक मॉडल है एंड इट इज नॉट सिमिलर टू जो बाकी यूनियन टेरिटरीज में मॉडल है. सो दिल्ली का मॉडल डिफरेंट है, इट इज यूनिक. एंड उन्होंने बोला कि दिल्ली इट प्रेजेंट्स अ स्पेशल कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल स्टेटस अंडर आर्टिकल 239 AA ऑल्सो. तो ये तो क्लियर है कि जो उनका स्ट्रक्चर है या जो मॉडल दिल्ली में वर्क करता है दैट इज यूनिक टू दिल्ली ओनली. सो सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने कोट किया फ्रॉम 2018 जजमेंट ऑल्सो, जहाँ पे जस्टिस चंद्रचूड़ सेड कि having regard to the history in the background, it would be fundamentally inappropriate to assign the NCT status similar to other union territories. Okay, so this was one thing. And जो 5-judge constitutional bench ruling थी 2018 में, majority opinion was कि it was written by the then CJ Mishra for himself and 2 other judges. So Justice Chandrachud and Bhushan wrote separate but concurring opinions in which they expressly vested the power to regulate the services with the Delhi government. So this is what they upheld. And इसके अलावा जब बात आई जो सेकंड फ्रेज था दैट इज सब्जेक्ट टू द प्रोविजंस ऑफ दिस कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन, जो सेकंड फ्रेज बोल रहा है, सो कोर्ट ने बोला कि इट इज नॉट यूनिक टू आर्टिकल 239 AA एंड इट कैन नॉट बी अ लिमिटेशन ऑन द Delhi government. So it cannot act as a limitation for the Delhi government क्योंकि ये article 239 AA में it is not a unique part of it. So phrase which is saying कि subject to the provisions of this constitution, it is not unique to this particular article. So इसलिए it can't act as a limitation for the Delhi government. So अब हम बात करें कि right now Delhi government की क्या powers हैं. So Article 239 AA specifically it is excluding 3 subjects: land, police, public order. So ये Delhi government के ambit में नहीं आते हैं and legislate इन पे Delhi government नहीं कर सकती है. So court acknowledged that these 3 issues they can also have some overlap with the services. So services की बात करें तो वहां पे थोड़ा overlap acceptable हो सकता है. Then key takeaways from the Maharashtra verdict की अगर हम बात करें तो CGI led bench it lays down the red lines. यहाँ पे हम इसको like detail में ले चुके तो आप लोग इसको you can just go through it once on your own and that would be important thing. So ethnic and family ties, why Mizoram is also now concerned about the Manipur violence. See Manipur में तो हम बात कर चुके हैं उनकी ethnic composition के बारे में, but now question आता है कि why the state of Mizoram is also concerned about जो मणिपुर में violence देखने को मिला. So मणिपुर में जो situation है we are clear about that. So मिजोरम के stand की बात करें तो on 3rd of May as first repose of solidarity march जो किया मतलब निकाला गया in the state of Manipur that emerged and तो जो चीफ मिनिस्टर हैं ऑफ मिजोरम के उन्होंने ट्वीट किया कि ही इज डीपली पेन्ड. सो जब वो सॉलिडारिटी मार्च निकाला गया उस पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम पे उनका ट्वीट आया. सो फॉलोइंग मॉर्निंग में हमने देखा चीफ मिनिस्टर ही रोट टू हिज मणिपुर काउंटरपार्ट रिक्वेस्टिंग हिम टू रीच आउट टू ऑल द पार्टीज एंड एंड द सेंसलेस वायलेंस. सो यू कैन लाइक सी क्या टर्म यूज किया जा रहा है, सेंसलेस वायलेंस. सो इन अ वीडियो स्टेटमेंट इशूड सब्सिक्वेंटली बिरेन मेंशन्ड that जो मिजोरम के चीफ मिनिस्टर हैं उनके concerns क्या हैं. They were mentioned and assured him that things would be settled and they would be normalized. मतलब ये जो normal talk था ये रहा. And like जो चीफ मिनिस्टर थे मिजोरम के he showed solidarity with the Kuki, Chin and Mizo ethnic group. So government also asked the deputy commissioners of all the districts to be on high alert and to make appropriate arrangements for their shelter जो basically will be seeking refuge in the state of Mizoram. So उसके लिए पूरे arrangements किए गए. So ethnic bond की अगर हम बात करें so at the heart of the political reaction in Mizoram is deep ethnic bond that Mizos share with the Kukis. So Kuki is the tribal community जो मणिपुर में reside करते हैं in the hilly regions. So Mizos जो हैं और Kukis के बीच में there is an ethnic bond. So Chin, Kuki and Mizo, they are conglomerate ethnic group collectively and they are known as the Zo people. So historically बात करें आप culturally, socially, linguistically they are all related to each other. So यहाँ से थोड़ा मिजोरम भी कनेक्ट हो जाते हैं इस इशू से. एंड these ethnic tribes they commonly trace their historical origin to a mythological cave which is known by different names among different tribes. So आप उनको चिन को बोलते हो when they are settled in the Burmese plains and Chin they became their official name in Burma. So Burma में they are addressed as Chin people and those who moved to the Lushai Hills, which is there in Mizoram, and Chittagong Hill tracts in Bangladesh from Chin Hills, they were then known as Kuki, and Kuki it became the official name in India. So जो term Mizo की बात करें, it began to be used officially in the Lushai Hills. Presently, it's in Mizoram since 1947. So ethnic bonds, they continue to endure across the state and international boundaries as well. And Mizoram is currently hosting nearly 3,000 people which they have like displaced by the violence in Manipur. So Mizo politician who declined to be named blamed कि Manipur government को blame किया गया for allowing the situation to get out of hand. So if they had handled the refugee situation better, this would not have happened. So that's all for today. Thank you so much for joining us and do subscribe to the channel and hit the like button for this video and show your support, and thank you so much for joining us for today.